Welcome to the Report, where we watch and talk about every episode of the Colbert Report from 2005 to 2014. That's a lot of episodes. I'm Alex.
And I'm Nathaniel.
And today's guest is Fareed Zakaria. So in the first ones, the truth thing was the truth-ecution.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that later on you would just do a new joke every day, but it seems like in this one they really want to hammer in the gags of truth and balls and all that.
Truthiness, etc.
Yeah. And the word is
disappointed.
And he talks and he starts off talking about caramel apples. And Bobby shows back up again and mentions candy apples, and that comes back up later. So Bobby is becoming a character in these days. Oh, by the way, just to mention, we are re-recording this after our previous one went wrong. So in case
anything comes up, we don't want to talk about it.
And also, it's been months since we recorded our last episode, so in case anything's different, that's why.
It's like the movie Two Funerals and a Wedding.
Yeah. And so the word is disappointed because he is disappointed with Saddam Hussein's trial, which started the day this aired.
It's Saddam in a playpen.
Yep.
Not a cage.
Yeah, not a cage. As I said, I hadn't actually seen many of the war criminal trials. I mean, I guess Eichmann was in a cage. Yeah, can you lean into? Sure.
Not a glass cage, no.
So, so it is basically they need better ratings. He does talk about Les Moonves, which I thought was interesting because Les Moonves was president of CBS for a long time, and this was a few months before Viacom got rid of CBS. But of course, Colbert would later go back on to CBS, and Les Moonves would be on his show the first episode. And then, of course, later Les Moonves would leave, and then Viacom would get CBS back again. So
how is Moonves spelled?
Moonves.
What kind of name is that?
I'll have to look up where Les Moonves is actually from.
Like space?
Yes, he's a moon person.
What's in the name?
He
is...
It doesn't say what. It
Jewish.
Says they're Jewish, but I'm not sure what.
Probably German thing.
Probably. I'll have to check that later, I guess. And speaking of Jewish, he does compare Saddam to a dinner theater Fiddler on the Roof actor.
Which is funny, because he had the beard.
Yeah, he has the beard. And just shave him down to the mustache, we know. Or put him in a Hannibal Lecter mask, but that means people wouldn't be able to see the mustache, so...
Yeah. I guess
that seems like a problem.
Why he would think that'd be a good idea.
Just to be more interesting. And they had the video of Saddam shooting at the public event from the balcony.
Yeah.
And that made me wonder why they don't do that in America, because, I mean, he used to be the president would just speak in public all the time, so I'm wondering... I mean, maybe he did do that in the old days, but...
I think, like I said, nowadays it does not seem dictatorial.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it is interesting. I guess it's the populist thing, once dictators started becoming a populist endeavor. And of course, back then, like, the way populism worked was different because some people really didn't want the president to be populist, and some people really did, so...
Yeah.
Probably something that, like, had a conflicting message about that would maybe be trouble.
It also just kind of become a sign associated with dictators. Maybe partially because of that Saddam video. But, like, if I picture somebody firing gum off...
I mean, I said just the other day when we were recording this, Erdogan was giving speeches from the balcony, so...
Yeah.
That's what made me think of it. And then they said there should be a woman fall in love with Saddam and make love inside the cage.
Inside the cage.
Yeah. And also, they made a joke about Saddam being the returning character from the original war to the sequel.
Is he the only returning character?
I mean, I'm not sure, but that's an interesting way to look at it, I guess. I feel like that's kind of the joke they'd make today, like the whole Civil War II Electric Boogaloo people.
Yeah.
They're probably not the people that we'd want to think of like that. But.
Does the president even have a balcony in which they could deliver
Maybe.
a speech?
I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like it wouldn't be that hard to pick one.
Yeah.
And so the next segment is Stephen settles the debate. He talks about the so-called implications of so-called global warming, about how the ice melting could open up new shipping lanes for exotic spices and meal derived from Asia. I guess that's sort of alluding to like the Northwest Passage thing.
Oh yeah, because yeah,
because I mean that is what they were looking for. Now they can kind of get it. So
yeah,
and they say a melting ice cap and rising sea level lifts all boats. I had to look up what the original saying was. It's just a rising tide lifts all boats. And I was really kind of surprised. It seemed to be more of a conservative economic saying, even though Kennedy was the one that made it popular. I guess the idea is like a good economy is good for everyone, even the poor people. But I feel like you'd also spin that and say that like welfare will help everyone, but that's kind of
It's a vague phrase,
yeah.
mostly, I would think,
And have the bald eagle transitions,
which are funny.
yeah. And Colbert is still saying the science isn't in yet, which I did find interesting. How that was still the line of debate at the time. Like the South Park, when they would deny global warming, they would always say the science isn't in yet. And like, was the science actually less in than yet, or did they just have an easier time pretending that because there were still a few discrepancies?
Yeah. Rather than now, it's almost worked backwards, and it's not. Well, not worked backwards, but just global warming is not as big a deal. I think
I
would be
mean,
the main line of debate.
it is interesting though why it's not. I guess maybe like other. Um, and so the debate is between whales and cod and orcas and seal
Yeah.
hunters. And he said he can make a plush out of all of them.
Yep.
And they make jokes about Japan eating whales, so I guess that must have been also talked about a lot at the
Still
time.
relevant. What was the channel in which they did that?
What do
Like
you?
the whale hunter one?
I forget
Was
when.
it Discovery Channel?
Whale Wars. I think either on Animal Planet or Discovery Channel.
Okay.
We'll look it up. Of course, South Park would make fun of Whale Wars, but
Maybe History Channel.
I know. No, it was on Animal Planet,
Okay.
and um, so also Colbert can't pronounce indigenous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we have white carpet at home. Seems like kind of the present meme when we talk about seal pups.
Yeah.
The seals have to die with dignity.
Because seals get thrown into the debate.
Yeah, and he's not sure which side to put them on because both sides eat because like seals eat the cod, but the seal hunters and whales eat the seals. So
And the orcs also eat seals.
that's what I said of the whales.
Yeah.
And I do kind of like how he's mocking the idea of debate. And of course, he did do this on the Daily Show with Even Steven. Like, it seems,
Yeah.
I guess, like debate on pundit things getting ridiculous. Of course, he's eventually going to make the segment formidable opponent where he debates himself. But
Which is kind of this.
yeah,
Probably an evolution.
yeah, and the whales and cod win. And Colbert says that caramel apples are the fabric of American life, and he hates
Wow.
candy apples.
Because they hurt children.
Yeah, so he asks Bobby, "Why do you hate children?" I guess starting some tension that will.
Because Bobby likes candy apples.
Yeah, and then they have our first tip of the hat, wag of the finger. But there's no real pun in the first part. I mean, there's kind of a joke with objectively divide facts so that you can make them up in your mind. Yeah.
That's funny.
And the first one is about teenage pregnancy going down. He gives a tip of the hat, I think.
Yeah.
And he says the same jokes about why don't they try oral sex instead. And the next one is about the Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise getting married.
What do you call an adolescent radioactive baby?
What?
A teenage mutant pregnancy.
That's not that funny.
Not a pun.
Well, it is a pun on Teenage
It's not
Mutant Ninja
really a
Turtles.
pun, but it's in there now.
Okay. Um, and so let's talk about Katie Holmes. I guess he mentions like some presumed presumed pornographic websites for celebrities, which I guess was as much of a demand then as it is now. So, and I did find the interesting thing about Katie Holmes's baited head because I assumed it was just a word for like virginity or whatever, and it is. But apparently, the reason was that head used to be a suffix similar to hood, but for now instead of adjectives. You said the first time we did this was neighborhead, I guess, but yeah, it's like I thought the godhead was the idea that it was like some entity of God's mind or something, but no, it's just like godhood or
Yeah.
goddess.
So head applies to a person.
I'm not sure. I don't think it's a person, but I mean nowadays it doesn't apply. But I guess they still have words like maidenhead sometimes.
Yeah.
It tips his hat to Tom Cruise for totally tagging it, sinking Earth's cruise missile.
Yeah.
Stat went on to an interview with Free Zakaria, who I know now works for CNN, but at the time I think he just worked for Newsweek because that's what they refer to.
Yep.
And he talks about how he sprung Saddam's painter for his set.
Yep.
Yep. And that whole 9/11 thing, which I thought was kind of bold given that it's just been 4 years
Yeah.
since 9/11 at the time. And then he mentioned the cockfighting and avian flu again, and I'll try to get back to the avian flu for the next episode because he talks more about that. And I did try to do some research into that. And then Zakaria tries to warn him about outsourcing. He says maybe they could outsource comedy, but Colbert, of course, says you can't outsource balls.
Yep.
And Zakaria even at the end says that Colbert just has balls on his mind, I guess. But it seems like the writers certainly do at this time. So
Do you think if one member of like a cuckoo nest gets like sick, it's one flew over the cuckoo's nest?
yes,
Yeah.
and Well, think about it, it is kind of a strange rhyme because cuckoos don't usually make their own nests; they use other birds' nests.
Yeah, but that doesn't really make sense.
I know. I mean, I think it is like an old. I think it is actually an old rhyme, and they just used it for the book because the cuckoo's nest is like a mental hospital. But
Yeah.
um, and I know you said that you thought that Fareed Zakaria handled it pretty well.
I mean, compared to like the other people who've interviewed, he didn't like try and play along, but he also didn't like kind of
Yeah,
get like mad at Colbert. He kind of just he just talked
yeah.
about what he wanted to talk, and he pretty much ignored him.
Maybe because he wasn't on TV as much as Stone Phillips and Lovely Stalwart yet. So
Yeah,
and and of course Colbert doesn't like that the world spins because he wants a no spin zone or
yeah,
an anti spin sector as he calls it.
yeah,
And this is, I guess, getting it. Of course, that was Bill O'Reilly's thing in real life, I'm pretty sure. And of course, it gets into that. I guess Fox was still trying to keep up the idea of that they were the fair ones. I mean, they still have fair and balanced as their slogan, I guess, but I feel like they don't
yeah.
emphasize. Like, I don't think they'd be as much afraid to call themselves the conservative media outlet now.
No, probably not.
Yeah. And um, Fareed Zakaria is bad that because of Iraq and stuff, the world calls America arrogant and boorish, and talks about the Iraq Constitution, which was adopted on September 18th, and the referendum was on October 15th, and it passed. And Colbert talks about like why don't we have strict constructionists? But getting back to the conservative Supreme Court thing,
Yep, and of course the Iraqi constitution is still in effect.
it is, yeah.
Uh,
That's somewhat surprising, but I mean, I guess
I mean,
some things were.
seems like it's going great for them.
Yeah, I guess it is. And according to Fareed Zakaria, the Sunnis thought the government was too weak, but the Shia want new elections to get in power. So,
Well, it seems like this. Not all of the Sunni were
yeah,
happy.
with
So
like ISIS or whatever. But I mean, that took a while, and it took Syria
yeah,
to fall for ISIS to show up. Although Iraq wasn't exactly stable either
no.
afterwards.
Was how was Iraq like during the post Constitution pre ISIS period?
I think that like there were like a lot of fighting still for a while, which was the reason why we didn't leave for until Obama went into office.
Okay, and then ISIS came along.
Yeah, I think it was generally somewhat stable until that. Although like
Didn't
not,
the
I
U.S.
mean the Kurds were still around.
didn't the
That
U.S.
was,
like kind of stay around and like enforce the government?
I mean that was until like 2009, I think, when they.
Yeah, but I think that like created general mistrust of like American soldiers, which kind of hurt
I
with
mean, yeah, I'm
ISIS.
sure it did. I know they did arrest the future founder of ISIS briefly,
Mm.
and so that.
You know, fun story. They've actually like in some ISIS like I guess promotional material, they have used like paradox games to show their ideal Islamic caliphate,
I think I might have heard of that. It's a good
which I just think is
approach.
funny.
Do they use like the modern Paradox games or like the old ones? Because
They used one of the old ones.
I mean like the ones that take place
One
back.
of the ones that take place
But
in
I
the.
mean, couldn't they just use a map of the actual Umayyad Caliphate?
Well, apparently theirs included like all of like part of like Western Africa too.
I guess that makes
But
sense.
also they want to do like a design on it too.
Uh,
But I just think it's a funny. It's funny.
yeah.
In,
And Fareed Zakaria thought that an international war crimes trial for Saddam would be better, which it probably would have been. But I guess the other part, the problem was that the U.S. did not really cooperating with the International Criminal Court at the time, in a sense, because they didn't want to make it harder for people to report them for war crimes.
yeah.
Although a lot of countries have joined the International Criminal Court so they could turn over their old
Mm.
leaders, so I don't think that would have necessarily been out of the question.
Does the U.S. have any of the judges on the International Criminal Court?
I'll check. I could do that
I
this
know
time.
it's a process. Um,
So
there is 18.
I
Yes,
know, yes, there's 18 judges, but um,
I wonder when did the U.S. start getting back involved in the uh, International Criminal Court?
um, oh, see, they have, um, they did sign, but then I guess they withdrew because they didn't want to be prosecuted.
Yeah.
Um,
Did Obama sign back on, or was it?
no, I don't think it's that easy.
Has the U.S. signed back on at all? Or
I'm not sure. I assume they still have some role. I'm gonna have to. So the judge in the international court right now,
no Americans?
yeah, no
One
Americans.
Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, and it can't just be no ones from the big countries because the UK and France are on the Security Council and they have judges. So
Yeah. Actually, it's a very. I may they probably have no two countries.
I mean, yeah, they probably don't have two judges for
I
this.
imagine they generally want unbiased
Yeah,
judges.
and Fareed Zakaria says that he's centrist on foreign policy, which is
Still
he
maintains
still
that.
says that. And although he does get a lot of claps from the audience when he says that Bush did something wrong, which I guess shows who the audience was in these early days.
Probably would remain to be for the rest
Yeah.
of the
And Colbert
rapport.
says that centrists don't have balls, which I feel like now a lot of people on the left would agree with too. But
Yeah,
yeah,
which begins the I believe like minute long discussion about balls in the episode.
I think there might be. And the after the interview, there's a segment called the inbox, which I know he did bring back at the end of the show's run, although it was not at the end of the episode when that happened. It just goes through a array of letters, except for, and all of them are praise, except for one of them, which takes him to task for calling Michigan a Democrat stronghold, because even though it had voted for the Democrats in the past two presidential elections, it still voted for Republicans most of the time.
Was that a real letter?
I'm not sure. I mean, honestly, that sounds like it could have been a real letter, but I would
I think
kind of
it's funny
defend
to
that
like
it's not.
mail into the Colbert Report with serious concerns about
Yeah. I
his
mean,
identifications.
maybe they did get concerns about that. They just reworked the letter to be more confrontational.
Yeah, and the other
And
ones were edited down to "You're so great."
yeah. And Colbert says he's not a trivia nut, but fortunately we are, so he'll have problems with that.
Yep,
And so that's this episode. Signing
and
off.
signing off.